Hi everyone, Marco here for a 46th and brand new episode of our special edition Lore of the Universal Century. Today is going to be a special day since we commemorate the 5000 subs on the channel, but also the 3 years anniversary of Gundam Facts. As such, today is going to feature a bit more different content, a full hour of relaxing time filled with lore, with me answering your questions proposed for this long-awaited Q&A. Make yourself comfortable, grab a cup of tea or coffee, open the snacks, and start unboxing the kits you have left for God knows how long in your backlog. Before we start, I just want to share a small positivity message to all of you. You have all been incredibly helpful and supportive across these 3 years, and I must admit, hosting and maintaining the channel with all of you has been one of the things that uplifted me the most through these years. It's not much, but in all these years, I lived through near 100 exams as part of my physics and acoustic degree, 2 proper breakups, a handful of so-called situationships, fallout with friends, fallout with family, and each time the road to recovery started because some of you rascals commented their thoughts in the comment section. You may think I never read them, but I actually do, and it is my favorite part of hosting Gundam Facts. Some of you may actually be struggling from stuff in life, like I did in these past few years, and I just want to make clear that me, alongside the rest of the 5000 people here, do care about you, how you're doing, and I also genuinely believe we are ready to help you out as much as we can. Gundam and Gunpla is a form of escapism, and in this search for escapism, we end up being friends with similar interests and values, and so it is normal to care for each other. So enough wholesome stuff, let's quickly start this Q&A. So our first question we have is if the YMS-08A, aka the high mobility type, and the MS-08, the Efreet, are related. This question is actually a very interesting one because with the similar form and model numbers, a parallel should immediately be drawn between both machines. Before you scratch your head, the high mobility type was a prototype machine completed early during the 1-year war by Zaimad in late winter, and which competed and lost against the prototype Gouf because it was deemed not enough of an improvement over the regular Zaku ground type by the committee. After this defeat, Zaimad had at least the decency to hand over its data to the rivals from Zeonic, who used it to fix some flaws in the prototype Gouf, thus creating the Gouf A type. Now, Japanese sources are pretty adamant that the high mobility type and Efreet are unrelated, despite the similar model number and form, with the high mobility type having been cancelled half a year before the Efreet was even conceptualized. Now, the same sources seem to indicate that there was seemingly a second attempt to revive the high mobility type based on data collected about the Federation Gundam, so at the earliest in October UC-79, near the time the White Base encountered Gamma forces, which seemed to coincide with the Efreet initial development. As such, it's totally possible that the Zeon Earth Attack Force attempt to revive the YMS-08 with what they learned from the Gundam actually failed, but kickstarted a development line that eventually led to the Efreet. Summed up, a similar situation to the Zaku High Mobility R2P being born out of a failed attempt to complete the MS-11. We can't be sure, but the Efreet could very well be something that was spawned by this second attempt at completing the YMS-08. Okay, let's discuss a bit about the ending of Unicorn and its consequences for the rest of the Universal Century. By the end of the OVA, Minivasabi is able to launch a public broadcast revealing to the entire world the existence of the Laplace box and the secret it contained, unveiling the hopes and dreams of the founding fathers of the Federation about the emergence of the new type of evolution. As such, a lot of trolls on the internet like to interpret Unicorn as something that would negate the late UC, a sort of different branching for them to avoid acknowledging F91, Victory, and Crossbone. Unfortunately, not only Unicorn is stuffed with Easter eggs about F91 and the upcoming late UC, but Harutoshi Fukui, the novelist who wrote Unicorn, has also publicly stated that Unicorn paved the way for the late UC, as a sort of miracle story that sadly wouldn't change the gritty universal century. Indeed, when asked about the ending of Unicorn, Fukui stated in an interview, I quote, that in a few years, the nation of Zeon will be dismantled and a future without hope and dreams awaits us in F91 and victory. In the Unicorn story, the protagonists are saved for a moment, but the entire world is still not saved. Yet, I think the best part of the story is that the protagonists who have saved their Earth even once in such a world will probably remain unbroken until they die. This statement shows the real impact of the Unicorn ending. Yes, Anaheim Electronics lost the Laplace box and so its best bargaining chip over the Federation government. Yes, the public now knows about the box, but it was ridiculous to think the system would be fixed by this simple action. The Unicorn and Banagher, they fight time and space and produce miracles, but miracles save individual lives, they do not change how our rotten world unfolds. And so, the cycle of hatred and blood of the universal century perpetuates for another century, as seen in F19FF, F90, F91, Crossbone, Victory, Dust, G-Savior, but even simply 1 year after Unicorn during the events of narrative. You can clearly see that the military is more interested in quelling the Unicorn incident and preparing for the end of the Republic of Zeon than really dealing with the aftermath of the Laplace box broadcast. Right now, I don't have many demands about Latus C, aside seeing how F90FF unfolds and perhaps beg Sunrise to consider animate F90 because that would really be a simple cash grab for them and a gift for the fans. Popular take, but I actually wouldn't want to see Crossbone Gundam animated anytime, because with all the sequels presents, the fans would cry about not getting them, and let's be honest, most people who ask for a Crossbone anime didn't even read the manga in the first place, and want it because the X1 and X2 looks cool, but yeah, they would cry at the sight of any Jupiter Empire mobile suit. Aside that, yeah, I think I would also love to see the second Hathaway Flash movie releasing. If Sunrise cooks like they cooked the first movie, I'm trusting them to make the wait worth it. I do have to agree that the Hario is a weird duck. Lore-wise, we know why the Federation forces have themselves an Alexandria. It was supposed to be the liaison ship between the R&D department of Luna 2, which was still Earth Federation forces assigned, and the Grips 2 colony base, which belonged to the Titans. As such, the Hario, as this courier ship working with the Titans, was in a sort of privileged situation, which is the reason why a Federation forces crew were able to gain access to such a fine vessel and a complement of Isaacs. Now, there were other regular Alexandrias and other Earth Federation forces Blue Isaacs assigned to the regular Federation forces, but they were an almost uncommon sight, unlike the Titans ones, which were omnipresent. Now, about its weird design, which seems to offer better protection for the bridge, I have a pet theory for the Hario, notably because of its paint scheme, shared with the Lombardia class. What if, instead of the popular theory that the Lombardia was a ship that competed and lost against the Alexandria for adoption, the Lombardia and Hario were both contenders for an upgrade plan for the Alexandria class, the Lombardia offering superior mobile suit capacity and deployment, while the Hario instead provided better defenses. As shown in Crossbone Dust, the Titans had still seemingly put the Lombardia to limited production, which Cyclops was able to recover 85 years later, which could indicate that if this theory was true, the Lombardia was chosen over the Hario and got limited produce instead, which could be a reason why the Hario was tossed aside as this liaison ship. Now, for the Zaku cannons, I don't have much clues, but it could be that there were testing units that were brought to either Grips or Luna 2 and that the Federation or Titans engineers were experimenting upon. Something to consider is that like the Isaac Marine vs Aqua Isaac competition, there could also have been a Isaac cannon vs Cannon Isaac competition, with these Zaku cannons being internally stuffed with Isaac parts, similarly to the Isaac Marine relation to the Zaku Marine type. A lot of speculations, but I hope it can help some of you. So here I'm assuming the question comes from the Zorin Soul Easter egg that was placed in F90FF and surprised everyone, myself included. Basically, we don't know much about the RX-110 in mainline UC, but F90 Fastos formula seems to imply it has similar origins to what Gaia Gear owns slate for it, with additional connections to other late UC suits. In Fastos formula, the RX-110 is said to have been a continuation of Anaheim Electronics' 5th generation of mobile suits, which was comprised of only the Penelope Anxi Gundam and one of the technical bases that Anaheim would recycle for the MSA-120 project. Indeed, the old lore about the MSA-120 being a retrofitted and boosted heavy gun has been adjusted with the appearance of the Drig Active, the Gundam-like first unit of the MSA-120 production. The Drig Active is thus painted as a mini version of the Penelope Xi, in which used the movable frame of the heavy gun too, but armor parts diverted from the Zorin Soul. Now, this doesn't mean F90FF hints the events of Gaia Gear as being part of the mainline UC, but is rather a sort of nod to its existence. Now, wherever we talk about regular continuity and Gaia Gear continuity, both share the fact that the Zorin Soul existed at some point and gave us the MSA-120 in regular late UC and the Gaia Gear Alpha in the Gaia Gear continuity. A personal question I see, and one I really don't know how to direct. Are we talking about out-lore, in-lore, with practicality taken into consideration, or just gimmicks that please me? Well, I don't know what I'm precisely asked. To widen a bit the topic, I have already kind of designed a Gundam for an old project of mine, the Rigor Gundam. See, this Rigor Gundam was supposed to be this Gundam from my novel set in UC 158 and the poster boy of the transition of technology from the Victory era to the Dust era. Since I really wanted to craft around the idea of a Gundam inspired by Zanscare technology, I actually based the Rigor on concept art from Junya Ishigaki for the Gengaozo, and then interpreted it in the lore as the Rigor being this bastard suit between Gengaozo and Victory 3. As such, the Rigor has features from Zanscare suits such as a third fox eye camera which couples with a beam string emitter, a more exotic alternative to the ever-present Vulcans. In terms of core technologies, I also tried to make the Rigor in line with the technological trend of the late UC 150s, shaped by the Minovsky drive being the Magnus opus of the era, and thus give the Rigor what I baptized the Minovsky Flash Unit, a sort of perfect version of the Minovsky drive, which avoid the Wings of Light parasite effect and granted a max acceleration of 36 Gs. Now, yes, I made the Rigor Gundam overpowered in the speed category, but overall not as bullshitty than the Unicorn Gundam. See, yes, the Rigor can reach 36 Gs, but this requires not only a G-forces resistant pilot, but also requires him to wear a special bulky normal suit filled with a G-resistant saline solution, and to complete that, a merry-go-round inner ring rotates inside the cockpit, providing geocentrifugal forces to counter the G effects during bursts. Sure, my Gundam can outclass any UC Gundams in terms of speed, but most Minovsky drive units could give it a run for its money, and because of the requirements to counter the G-forces, I also introduced the idea that the Rigor could only be piloted through what is called a Psycho interface, the combination between a Psychomu and a biocomputer. This Psycho interface means only a powerful new type can control the Rigor Gundam by essentially mentally puppeteering it and feel what the machine feels, but at the downside of being a massive strain to handle and atrociously hard to control. Before you accuse me of nepotism, Rigor is a story about the final active years of the Federation forces in a loosely united form, the emergence of mixed builds, and a bridge story to make Crossbone Dust more appreciable and understandable. The Rigor Gundam is meant to be overpowered, yet flawed, and serve as one of the story's primary plot points, a narrative pusher. It is a uber powerful machine that the protagonist would spend the entire story trying to tame, and show that even if you manage to muster the most powerful warhorse available, you can't always save the princess if the dragon burned the castle to crisp. Gundams were only enough to win battles, sometimes wars, but certainly not provide stable peace to the Earth sphere, nor fix the universal century course, not even if it was the most powerful one ever made. The fact that this question has been brought is really heartwarming. I mean, it really cements the fact that I'm liked and praised for my latest UC shipyards content, and for that, I'm genuinely happy. Now, no, I will not create another channel for real-life vehicles. First of all, I don't have any plans for another channel aside this one. I do have quite an active life, and even putting my efforts in Gundam facts is sometimes a bit difficult. Now, secondly, well, I feel I'm far from being qualified to address even only real-life naval ship designs. I mean, I already talk of gun caliber in millimeter rather than in inches, and that would be enough for the really toxic community of battleship enjoyers to send me death threat. So, here is a question I have been fairly asked across the years. Will I ever cover alternative universes lore like Wing, 00, Seed, IBO, and other different timelines? The answer is going to be fairly short and brutal. Absolutely not, and for multiple reasons. First of all, I'm not really a big fan of the other timelines, and well, I don't think I have to justify myself on that. I sometimes enjoy some parts of them, but it's not exactly my cup of tea. And worse, I severely lack knowledge about most of these, so I wouldn't be able to provide good facts, at least not naturally. Now, what might happen is that I could eventually come to cover Ternay and Jireko stuff, because it is loosely tied to UC, and also because I quite enjoyed both series. Naturally, don't start spamming do a Ternay complete development video, but an Elf Bullock one might perhaps someday come to life. Well, first of all, this question could have seemed like a self-explanatory dead end. All transformable mobile suits which belong to the third generation are equipped with a movable frame, which is the gateway for the second generation of mobile suits, so technically, no mobile suit could be a transformable type without having at least a movable frame. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule. Transformable mobile armors were a thing before the advent of the movable frame, and instead relies on what is called a variable mechanism, which is similar but way more crude and less refined, and of course much larger. Another loophole is found with the use of the drum frame, which can serve as an alternative to the movable frame and supports the transformation of suits such as the Woundwort and Tigris II, so I think we could label the Tigris II as the best transformable suit without a movable frame, as it relies on the drum frame and came around 20 years after the Woundwort. Now I know who asked the question, and so I realize this question is actually a trap to force me to talk about 1 year war era prototype transformable mobile suits and ask me which between the G-Dummy, Zaku Speed, GT4 prototype and GT4 is the best suit. How all these suits are able to transform nearly a decade before the advent of the movable frame is never really specified, but the best guess of Japanese sources is that since all these suits were fairly big and bulky, they used a proto-version of the variable mechanism, later inherited by the transformable mobile armors. If we compare these four suits, the GT4 test prototype is going to be excluded pretty quickly, considering its scarecrow state, quickly followed by the Zaku Speed, who lost to one of the two remaining competitors, the GT4. Now, between GT4 and G-Dummy, I would give more credit to the G-Dummy, as its transformable mechanism is effective to a fault and even pack a Minovsky craft system, unlike the GT4, which wasn't meant to shift forms at any hours of the day. Now, before we end this question, the validity of the G-Dummy and byproduct of Nighthawks is going to be put to question by some of you. I know it. Still, considering it is one of the original 1 year war side stories, predating most of the stuff that fans gobble with of issues, and even worse, specially drawn to appeal to the original generation of fans who grew up with Mobile Suit Gundam, I would still take it into consideration. If you accept Blue Destiny and Missing Link, you have no rights to complain about pillow talks. Quite an interesting question, I would say, considering the Silver Bullet is more or less just the Dovenwolf but gemized or Gundamized, depending on the head unit you're considering. Now, aside the paint and the head unit, there are several differences between Silver Bullet and Dovenwolf when you compare both suits closely, notably when it comes to their weaponries. On one side, the Dovenwolf comes with a pair of inbuilt megaparticle cannons, each rated at 5.3 megawatts and capable of inflicting severe damage while granting it anti-ship abilities. These cannons are complemented by a large beam rifle with a 12.5 megawatts output, and which can be connected to the cannons to buff the output to 40.2 megawatts and thus serve as a sort of hyper mega launcher. On the other hand, the Silver Bullet comes with an interesting idea, adopting the Gigant Beam Rifle on one hand, but a composite weapon on the other, mixing the Gigant Shield on his two tubes missile launchers with the Dovenwolf own beam rifle. The rest of the armaments, including their numerous anti-ship missiles, war-guided hands, incoms, and hyper beam sabers, are completely shared between Dovenwolf and Silver Bullet, so they become non-factors. Of course, with his chest beam cannon, we can see that the Dovenwolf has superior inbuilt weaponries than its successor the Silver Bullet. With these cannons comes the possibility to overwhelm the Silver Bullet through the Hyper Mega Launcher buff. Now, while the Dovenwolf indeed has superior firepower, there is also the fact that it needs to use its two hands to use the Hyper Mega Launcher feature, while the Silver Bullet instead beneficiates from the fact that its cannon is built into the shield and thus retain a free arm for secondary fire, or simply to engage the Dovenwolf in close-range combat more quickly. Because of this, I would give the odds in the favor of the Silver Bullet if its pilot is capable of handling the advantage of close-range combat and use it to kill the Dovenwolf out of long-range combat, so that its superior firepower become a non-factor. I assume this question refers to the greyish Pegasus we see around the white base when stationed at Las Palmas during the opening sequences of the movie Cucuruz Doan Island. I also assume that the answer the person who asked is eager to hear is something akin to the "Yay, hey, it's the Great Ghost, another Pegasus class." Truth be told, we actually don't know, and it's actually okay. First of all, if you look closely, you can see that the white base is surrounded by two identical grey Pegasus, not one, and that's actually rather important. Cucuruz Doan Island takes place in the origin continuity, despite some weird statement from the animation staff, where the one-year war events of Mobile Suit Gundam are really modified when compared to the regular continuity. After landing on Earth and encountering Gamma, the white base directly go to Jaburo instead of literally circling the entire globe to participate Operation Odessa. Then go to Jaburo with the origin white base, then spearheading Operation Odessa from the western front instead of the eastern. In the origin continuity, Operation Odessa notably starts with a landing operation in the Gibraltar Strait, operation the white base is heading to after its rest at Las Palmas, as showcased in the Cucuruz Doan movie. This operation is conducted jointly with other Pegasus class which have been limited produced in the origin continuity. So, these other Pegasus you are seeing are just the limited produced sister ships of the origin white base, hence why they are both painted in dull grey colors. This question is also very interesting. Basically, I'm asked if a first generation suit, let's say a Galgog, could have its skeletal frame, so a first generation frame, ripped off and replaced by a movable frame, aka a second generation frame. There are two answers to this peculiar question, a short one and a long one. Surprisingly, they are contradictory. The short one is, no, you can't do that. The skeletal frame of a first generation suit is basically just a core structural layout over which the mobile suit parts are grafted. Mobile suit parts which contain the vital electronics and mechanism, which mean that much like the human body requiring the muscle and nervous system to move the bone structure, a first generation suit cannot even function with its skeletal frame alone, as the key features reside in the additional parts. In opposition, the movable frame of second generation suits packs the vital movement system and electronics in the same frame, which means that even without all the armor layers, a second generation suit could still move like a functional mecha, also far from being a practical one. There is a gap between skeletal frame and movable frame, and so a simple swap shouldn't normally be possible. Now, the long answer would say that there have been precedents of doing just that in the lore. The primary example is the Stardust Ritter, which is said to have been reworked by Axis and Anaheim to to replace the original semi-monocoque construction, so the skeletal frame, with a movable frame. Although, as one can see, it also involved far greater external modifications for the armor parts to adapt to the movable structure. Another common example would be the Gym 3, which is said to be a second generation suit, unlike the Gym 1 and Gym 2. But I would say that it's entirely possible that the Gym 3 with a movable frame were newly produced units, while the retrofitted Gym 2s were likely still first generation rated and stuck with the original skeletal frame of the good old vanilla Gym. So, to give a definitive answer, yeah, it is possible to swap the frame, but the external armoring is going to need to be greatly modified in parallel for that to even work. A quick answer to this question would be to say that I'm French, and thus the only Gundam series featuring a guillotine was bound to be my favorite show out of the whole UC saga. Now, more seriously, I think I really like Victory for multiple reasons. First of all, well, because of nostalgia bias, since it was the very first show I watched as a kid, no matter how traumatizing that was, yet which led me to later on discover the original Mobile Suit Gundam TV series, kickstarting my UC addiction. Aside that, I'm really compelled by Victory because there is much more to this series that most people realize. Sure, the show is gritty, grimdark yet goofy at some points and flawed to a fault, but it also conveys very interesting ideas, innovative concepts, and is basically the end result of Tomino spiraling into depression. Most people tend to shit on Victory because Tomino was depressed, he botched everything, while barely realizing the reason they hate Victory, its mechanical designs, is far different from the real reason that led to Tomino disliking it. Victory is the series that was crafted in a turning moment in Gundam history, when Sunrise and Bandai merged and when Tomino realized his original view of Gundam was going to be perverted by cash grabbing and commercial lobbying. His impression was found to have been an accurate prediction, with Bandai and Sunrise immediately trying to take advantage of Victory as a financial cash cow, which is, if you were wondering, the reason why so many toys were created for Victory mechs back in the 90s. Tomino wanted to tell a story, Sunrise wanted to sell stuff, and when Sunrise became a bit too demanding, such as asking Tomino to add battleships to the show so that they could sell related toys, Tomino completely snapped and proposed a ridiculous wheeled battleship, the Adrastea class, which to his horror, Sunrise accepted as they were blinded by the idea of profit. This kickstarted Tomino botching episodes, killing vital characters without any reasons, and barely designing or revising mech designs approved for the series. This was a stark departure from his own previous attitude during the making of the original Mobile Suit Gundam TV series, where he participated in almost all vehicles' final designs. In contrast, the only design created by Tomino for Victory is the mobile worker known as the Senhoj, really showing his mental state at the time. Now, you probably all know this stuff already, considering it's the main point that Victory detractors like to highlight. What they don't want to talk is that Victory wasn't just shaped by Sunrise greed, nor Tomino depression. It was also the efforts and work of the entire animation staff and mech designers that genuinely poured love and dedication into the project. The main designer of Zanscare mechs, Junior Ishigaki, genuinely tried to do his best to sell the idea of an innovative brand of antagonist far away from Zeon, while keeping up with both Sunrise and Tomino and their unrealistic demands. For example, the Einrad was created by him to meet Tomino's vague demand for mobile suit cavalry, starting with Central-like sketches which have been since reused in Crossbone Love and Peace to eventually create the Einrad, an attempt to have cohesive lore with Tomino's stupid Adrastea class. Ishigaki remembers fondly of his own efforts for Victory world and mecha building, having even posted a concept sketch of a Zanscare-style Gerbera Tetra lookalike not too long ago on his Twitter. This outlaw chaos is really felt in the TV series, and although the show botches a lot of stuff, it still lets some concepts and designs have a moment of genuine glory. Victory is full of good ideas, from a protagonist mothership stolen from the antagonist faction, the Minovsky drive system and the Wings of Light, the fair use of Hario as a useful little gremlin vital to the plot, sociopathic characters that aren't nuanced for the plot's sake, PTSD-ridden antagonists with an intense but compromised sense of honor, gimmicks, other gimmicks, even more gimmicks, gimmicks again, and of course really good character development for the whole cast, even for non-mobile suit pilots. Of course, Victory is full of flaws, and that's without talking about Lupsino pedophilic tendencies or the bikini girls that Uzo ends up barbecuing. But the bad doesn't erase the good stuff, nor the good stuff erase the bad one. Now, a hot take I have is that if Zanscare was just swapped for Zeon on their mono-eye suits, most fans wouldn't bat an eye. And while Tomino would still have hated Victory from his guts, most Zeon-pilled beggars would have instead worshipped the series unconditionally, praising it for being grimdark levels of cool. But hey, that is just my personal take. So, to keep ourselves in the Victory era, I'm now asked about the length and specs of the Zanscare War, the conflict portrayed in Victory Gundam. The timeline of the Zanscare War is actually fairly well documented, with the war officially starting in October UC 152 and ending in June UC 153, with Victory events starting around February-March UC 153. Now, the war maybe lasted for only 8 months, but it actually kind of extended for a longer period of time. Indeed, we know that Zanscare officially declared war on the Earth Federation only in UC 152, by essentially launching an operation to attack Earth itself, but it is said that their expansion started around UC 150, with their forces spreading toward the rest of Side 2, Side 1, and later the Moon. As such, the Zanscare War essentially lasted around 3 years, with the 2 initial years being more of a Cold War than anything else, with Zanscare mostly battling other colonies' defense forces inside Side 2 and, from time to time, Earth Federation backwater squadrons. This explains why the Ligue Militaire was formed as early as UC 149, sometimes after Zanscare's proclamation of independence, with its aggressive expansionism, left unopposed by the Federation, being what kickstarted the civilian militia in the first place, and gave it time to develop its own suits as part of the Victory project. I'm now asked how exactly the actions of Char Aznable created full Frontal, and how exactly Frontal came to be. The truth is, we don't exactly know, as neither Fukui or Furuhashi, the director of the Unicorn OVA, wanted to make things crystal clear, and for good reasons. In the novel, Fukui's backstory for full Frontal is that he is a cyber new type, surgically modified to look like Char, with similar facial features, the same exact headscar, gold hairs, and of course fighting style and mannerism. Thus, Frontal is a puppet leader created by Side 3 Minister of Defense, Monaghan Bakarov, to quickly rally and federate the Zeon Remnants to move forward the Side 3 co-prosperity sphere, his last-ditch attempt to avoid the Republic of Zeon, looming dissolution planned for UC 100. Now, in the novel, Frontal is mostly just that. A puppet, a decoy, who is actually very well aware of his own nature, but that's settled to be Char if people want and need him to be this figure, so long as it can fulfill his goals. Indeed, in the novel, people usually comment how Frontal is not 100% like Char, having more physical strength, an almost identical yet slightly different voice tone, and stuff like that. Now, for the OVA, Furuhashi wanted Frontal to be a bit more nuanced as a character. Not just a copy tool like Fukui had initially presented, a bit more like a possible spiritual successor to Char's own will, inhabited by Char's disappointment following the Axis shock. In this version, Frontal claims that a part of Char's soul continued surviving inside the Sazabi psychoframe, while most of it moved to the new type higher dimension, with the leftover soul part left behind, eventually leeching upon full Frontal as a vessel, the very creature supposed to impersonate him. Is it a lie from Frontal, a delusion, or a genuine truth as testified by Unicorn's ending scenes with Lala and Amuro souls escorting Char's leftover soul? Well, Fukui and Furuhashi both discussed about that and both preferred to keep it unclear, and I respect and admire their decision. I'm now asked about which of the many variants of the Tier 6 Wantworld is my favorite or favorites. To be frankly fair, I'm not the strongest defender of this feminine bunny-like Gundam, but I must admit, it has a very interesting lore and its internal drum frame make it a bit more standout than most advanced of Zeta mechs. If I had to choose, I think I would have to go with the Tier 6 Azul 2. Not only the dark blue Titan's paint scheme works quite well on the Wantwood, but the two long beam rifles fixed on the backpack make it look so unbalanced, I can only love it. Now, aside the Hazel 2, I also have a soft spot for the Tier 6 Isaac 2. I mean, the idea of a mass production version of the Wantwood bastardized with Isaac's inspired parts is very refreshing. And well, I had to try a kit bash of it myself. The result was dubious, but at least, hey, I tried. I also kinda like the Tier 6 Gym 2, but this one is mainly because I'm not super fond of the bunny legs of the OG Wantwood. This Zaku is indeed one of the many mixed builds from the wild ride that is Crossbone Dust. From what we know, it is just another shitty mech used in Zabi's Zeon main colony, which combines a Zaku head with a V-fin, Shuagu arms, a main body made of a Gym torso, and a lower waist made of Zaku parts. Before you ask, this thing doesn't do much aside floating around aimlessly during Cyclops' attack on Side 3, but we can see that the model was rather popular in the colony as some random child is shown with a toy version of it. A random mixed build, but rather a funny one. Actually, it doesn't have any official name, so try to find one for it and write it in the comment section. Of course. Yes, I'm going to do a video about the Crossbone Gundam unit someday, especially since I can't wait to cover my babies, the Crossbone X12 and X14. Now, because of all the lore the Crossbone packs, I think I will have to divide it in 3 different videos. One about the X1, one about the X2, one about the X0, and perhaps the X3 stuff somewhere else. I mean, I'm covering stuff like the Nautilus and the Erebado. There was no way I would leave the beloved Crossbones aside. Ah, yes, the Rhinoceros. Indeed, another odd duck that didn't amount for much. For those who don't know, the Rhinoceros was a ground mobile armor created in the late One-Year War by the Zeon Remnants base in Australia, later encountered and defeated by the White Dingo squad in early UC80. The Rhinoceros is indeed a cool design that doesn't amount for much in the grand scope of the UC lore. Aside being a design reference in the development of the Dom Gnomides, the Rhinoceros seems like a sterile ground, a standoff ground mobile armor, which concept would be lost to time. And you know what? That's totally okay. I mean, that thing was created in a rush using leftover parts and scraps left around cursed Australia. It is self-fulfilling as it is and doesn't need to be the daddy of an entire future line of mobile weapons. Some developments wouldn't be continued, and that's part of the engineering cycle. Now, something I really adore about the Rhinoceros is the gimmick with the Type A and Type B. For those who don't know, the Rise from the Ashes original video game featured an interesting idea for the Rhinoceros, depending on your own actions when dealing with the transport entering Alice Spring. Basically, if the player managed to stop and destroy the train, the final mission featuring the Rhinoceros would feature the Rhinoceros Type A, equipped with a regular 200mm cannon, while failing to stop the convoy wounded aboard the Alice Spring mission, labeling it as a failure, letting the player continue his playthrough instead, but with an additional twist down the line. In this turn of events, the Rhinoceros of the final mission would replace the 200mm cannon for a stolen burst linear beam cannon, which was transported in the train the player had previously failed to stop, thus rendering the final boss fight a bit more difficult. This idea of failing a mission in a video game that wouldn't result in you having to start over the mission, but merely causing more hardships later on, was an idea that was mind-blowing when I had the chance to play Rise from the Ashes on a friend's Dreamcast around 2015, and to be honest, I was actually left with the thought that there had to be other mechanics like that hidden in the game. For example, I thought to myself, perhaps not killing the Zaku fast enough would result in its pilot retreating and coming back in a Gouf or a Dom in a future mission, so I had to take care of him to prevent this situation. Of course, we now know it was not the case, but the Rhinoceros plot point really left a strong impression on me and rendered my playthroughs much more stressful and interesting, as I was left with only speculations about what could my actions or inactions lead to. Really hope more games take into account this kind of stuff, because giving consequences to the player's direct decision making really provide a better immersion. Is Fastos' formula a good manga? Could seem like a stupid yet worthy question at the same time. First, any late UC content is welcomed, so F90FF started with a good point in its favor. Now, Fastos' formula has proved countless times to be far more than the story it tells. The first arc with Patsy and Kid Leaf, so the story set in UC 112, was a nice story about field testing and mechanics gimmicks around the F90 itself, a good way to show off future toys, so good business for Bandai. Yet, the authors still decided to not already bring Zeon Remnants to please the fold, going as far as introducing new exotic design tropes for the new antagonist of Rendager Heavy Industries, which was a bold move I really respect. The second arc, set in UC 115 with Teenager Leaf and the testing and use of the F90 Unit 3, followed the formula of the first arc, but quickly accelerate the pacing to tell a reliable and interesting story with compelling characters. Fastos' formula could have stopped at that and be already a widely uploaded manga, but the truth is, it is far more. F90FF takes the time to look up to past installments set in early but also late UC, acknowledging and linearizing other manga works to fit a cohesive continuity, an effort I really appreciate. For example, F90FF gives more context to events of F91 that were only once mentioned in the novel, developing around Anzori Rona, the prince that was assassinated and a Federation assembling member, a pre-mental breakdown Iron Mask still in his persona of Karotsu Rona, Birnam, the early form of the Crossbone Vanguard Mobile Forces, the Botch Concern, the future manufacturer of Cosmo Babylonia, while also heavily building up more Zeon and events told in the UC 122 Senki games, properly establishing from which Zeon Remnant base Mars Zeon spawned from and its connections to the Crossbone Vanguard. In parallel to that, F90FF is not afraid to connect its story with the events of Crossbone Gundam, showing off Damien Karras and Fons Kagati, thus preluding to the Jupiter Empire of the UC 130s and thus tying F90 to Hasegawa works. Through the monthly mobile files, most of which told from the perspective of Zanscare citizens, some of which even appearing in Victory Gundam like Get-Old Dupré, F90FF also pay its homage to Victory Gundam, a sort of way to embrace the entirety of the late UC and not just what the author like. Ice on the cake, F90FF also acknowledged Attaway Flash and its world building, giving it tangible connections to the UC 120's lore, which is also appreciated. Now, F90 Fastos' formula is far from being perfect. The first arc is rather slow in pacing, and even after the time skip, a lot of characters ends up being boring or not really relevant, while the story itself don't know how to steer itself. From mixing testing grounds to conspiracy discoveries, to Zeon Remnants mob-up to surprise attacks, sometimes F90FF forgets to keep things crystal clear and can be accused of overly relying on Easter egg spamming while badly managing its story course that ends up being tentacular. The first part of the manga is a bit dull, and the second one wants to do too much at the same time. This being said, I still greatly appreciate the manga and welcome it as one of the best additions to recent late UC lore. Now, as a bonus point, F90FF also acknowledged double fake under the Gundam, and that's a massive point in its favor. Is the Gundam Mark V and the Tier Plan related to each others other than the Hazel 2 and Mark V sharing the same beam rifle and some tier units on the Gundam Mark V both introducing the Quasi-Psychomu? The question is a bit daunting, but I can understand where it comes from. From what I've always seen, the Hazel 2 and Mark V sharing the same beam rifle has always been a sort of Easter egg, a sort of background note hinting at the involvement of the Augusta Labs in some parts of the Tier Plan. Now, weapons alone aren't the greatest connection proofs when it comes to Gundam. For example, the Isaac and Zaku share the same type of beam rifle, yet it doesn't mean the Isaac is part of the Zaku lineage. simply that it recycles the older beam rifle design of the MS-11. In the same vein, the beam rifle of the Gundam Earth type has also made cameos in the hands of the Red Seal in Unicorn and in the hands of the Gym Nightseeker space type in Mobile Suit Variation Return. Again, it does not mean all these suits are closely related, just that the weapon is somewhat shared. In addition to that, Advance of Zeta has pretty much always and purposely let the Mark line suits outside of its design grounds, with the Mark II being an exception, but the Mark III to V being almost never referenced and tied to the design of the tier plan. Why exactly isn't clear, but if I had to guess, it is because it is difficult to twist the Mark III original lore, involving it being an Ananiam Electronics design sold to both the Titans and the Ayuk, to fit the valuity madness of the tier plan. Advance of Zeta has strangely already worked around the Dovenwolf design, so perhaps they will someday twist the Mark V design. Still, right now, no foundation has been laid for it in the Advance of Zeta Wallmaker world. The question that is now brought is what gave the Jovian such a heightened technological ability, which I can only interpret it as a synonym for what made the Jovians such excellent mobile suit designers. If this was the question intended, then let me break this kind of misconception the asker may have about the Jovians who, all pun intended, are far from being good mobile suit designers and manufacturers. Now, I know some of you are already watching me with the Mr. Fresh stare. The fuck you mean? Didn't you literally praise the Erebado on other related Jovian suits in your very own last video? And the thing is, being a bad designer and manufacturer of mobile suits doesn't mean you can't create excellent results with high performance. It means those suits, even if there are a handful, are exceptions rather than the norm. I mean, just look at the Jupiter Empire's mainstay suits from the UC 120s to the UC 170s. We start with the Batala, a retrofitted mobile worker, which is reliable to the point of being adopted by the resource-lacking Crossbone Vanguard, but not practically effective on its own, crippled with multiple design flaws like very poor cruising range, and often relying on sheer numbers to attack the enemy. After that, we have the Arana, which despite its lightweight and being equipped with crude fin nozzles, still remains a cheap mass production grunt to send to the enemy in masses, lacking a beam shield or any decent defenses and leaning even more in the quantity over quality approach. The Nuevo Arana that succeeded is a bit better and a decent pick, but still, it follows the Arana and its design philosophy. Now, if you move to the special suits, the Jovians, yes, have proven multiple times to be able to create out-of-the-box, creative and innovative systems for their suits, with the Zaku series or the Dictus proving they are capable of manufacturing deadly assets on their own. Still, one needs to remember that the Jupiter Empire failed to recreate the X-shaped thrusters of the Crossbone X2, only succeeding in a much larger variant for the X2 Kai that was still hardly on par with the quality of the original Shinri's manufacturing. Later in Ghost, we learned that the Phantom was created by literally shoving the F-99 under stifled black box with Amakusa technology, with the suit being a failure as the internal systems were barely understood by the Phantom's own designers. That's like copying a Python code from internet you of course don't understand, then do a Pikachu face when it doesn't blend with your own work. Hardly the proof of being an excellent mobile suit designer. Now, by the time of Crossbone Dust, Jupiter is in a much better shape than the Earth sphere as a whole, being unaffected by the tech regressal and having thus become the beacon of innovation in UC. Despite this setting, it is also important to note that the Jupiter Foundation, despite all these odds in its favor, was still strongly with Inosuke drive technology, with the problem of their latest prototype, the Grampus, being fixed in a one-year record through the transmission of information from Cyclops Earthsphere located engineers, which means that the Earthsphere engineers, if banded together effectively and given the means in the chaos of the Dust era, were still far more competent than their Jupiter counterparts in some fields. The question here could seem obvious to some of you, but I think it's important to address. Why is the Zaku series, the original but quickly surpassed mainstay model of the Principality of Zeon, the suit that is always seen in the hands of the Zeon Remnants, far more than more advanced later models such as the Gundam or even Gelgog. The first answer is actually extremely boring as it addresses outlaw politics and sunrise marketing, with the Zaku, a design that proved surprisingly popular at the time of Mobile Suit Gundam, being the second poster boy of the Universal Century right next to the Granddaddy, thus provide a stable and reliable baseline for slight variants to be sneaked in related UC works. What I'm trying to say is that it is safe for Sunrise to keep using Zakus on its variants instead of lore-wise more powerful but sometimes less popular models, a sort of way to keep the Zeon fans hooked to the screen without taking any risk by, for example, introducing a Zeon model that would be less liked, as was the Gyan for several decades. The second answer, the in-lore explanation, is actually very simple and can be explained by looking back at the timeline of Zeon mobile suit development. From the prototype Zaku creation in UC-74 to the start of the One-Year War, the Zaku series was the only officially produced mobile suit model of the Principality of Zeon, with stuff like the Zeta being standalone prototypes mostly unknown by the public. Even as the One-Year War unfolded, the Zaku 2 and its variants absolutely dominated the representation among Zeon models, remaining the only fielded models more or less until September UC-79. Yes, the fieldable models of the Gouf series were introduced around April UC-79, as was the GOG and other amphibious mobile suits starting by May, but it was the Zaku 2 that was fielded in masses everywhere. The baseline Zaku F-Type reaching a total production of 3,246 units, which combined with its variants and the Zaku 1, was said to have reached a total of 8,000 units in total. If you compare these numbers with suits that attempted to phase out the Zaku 2 and were approved for such role, such as the Gundam or Gelgog, the produced numbers immediately shrink, with the Gundam being estimated as having been manufactured in a 400 units production, while the Gelgog 700-ish units order was eventually reduced to only 175 units. As you can see, even by combining the Gundam, the few Goufs, the Gelgogs, their variants, the amphibious units, and the few standalone prototypes, the numbers wouldn't even reach half the production of the Zaku series. In the end, it's a game number, and if you are covering a group of stranded Zeon Remnants in a backwater area, so likely not the best equipped lads, chances are that Zakus are going to spawn fairly more often than other Zeon suits, simply due to the Zaku series' massive distribution compared to any other models. Which was the first mobile suit I ever saw that made me get into Gundam? For those who stayed up until now and heard my entire ranting about Victory, this question could seem pretty much self-explanatory, with the Victory Gundam or Shokeu appearing in the first episode of Victory being the suit I ever laid my eyes on and cemented my long road toward the UC fanbase. As much the Shokeu is my baby Vespa, it is actually not this suit that made me dive into Gundam, but actually a very different suit that is still part of Victory. See, I watched Victory for the first time around 2010 when I was around 8 years old, with the entire series being downloaded on an illegal DVD-ROM acquired from a modeling store in Paris and shamelessly plugged on a unused computer in my parents' lab, all the while during the Christmas holidays. Now, the reason why I ever got this DVD in the first place was because this same modeling store was selling Victory-related mobile suits in actions and proposed these illegal DVDs for the moderate price of €7 for those interested in the lore behind the kits. Sadly, at that time, my parents had spoiled me with Legos already and were happy dubitative in offering me other kind of toys, so my pocket money only enabled me to barter with the shop owner for a DVD sold for €5. Yet, in the end, I did not have nearly enough money to afford one of these kits I was particularly interested in, my beloved Marshmallow, the Kontio. See, there is a reason why I did a so long video about the Kontio and why I eventually bought years later its mobile suit in action. It was the same toy I failed to acquire as a kid and caused me to acquire the DVDs instead, thus making me discover Victory Gundam. Now, I eventually watched the original Mobile Suit Gundam only around 2015, and this return to the Gundam lore, which eventually kickstarted me watching in quick succession Mobile Suit Gundam, Zeta, then F91, was caused by the discovery of the wonderful Gouf flight type from the 8 Mobile Suit team in a random YouTube video. From the Gouf flight type, I discovered the regular Gouf, then after some research, ramble, which caused me to scour the internet for Mobile Suit Gundam UC-79, which I failed to find, then found by chance on YouTube. The channel that had it, which had the entirety of Mobile Suit Gundam and Zeta Gundam, was eventually atomized by Sunrise in the past few years, but stayed around by late 2019 at the time I decided to start Gundam Facts. So, if you want to summarize, the contra drew me to Gundam in the first place and not reality for such an unloved mobile suit. The Shockow on the Gunneezy cemented my love for victory and hooked me to this black sheep of a series. Then what eventually made me into a real UC scholar would eventually be the Gouf series, which is not surprising. Before I end this personal question, there is an anecdote I also want to talk about. See, although victory on F91 ran in my veins since a young age, I was originally one of the strongest haters of Crossbone Gundam, going as far as erasing it all together from my own headcanon. There was one exception, which was Crossbone Ghost. I adored because of its connections to victory. One exception, the rest was trash to me. It wasn't until around 2021 that I seriously decided to give Crossbone another try, and boy, this time I loved it. Although I'm still a bit dubitative with some parts of Cucuruz and the entirety of Crossbone Dust, Ghost and the OG Crossbone remain excellent stories with compelling narratives and mechs, while Steel 7 is perhaps the best mashup between Gundam, 7 Samurais, and Suicide Squad I could ever dream of. Love and Peace is sometimes genius, sometimes mid, and X11 is alright in my book, but as you can see with my own Crossbone story, late UC is an acquired taste, not something you're born with. It's okay to prefer early UC, but please give the late UC a chance, and don't dismiss it altogether, because there is no Zeon or Mono Eyes. So, last question for today's video. Why was there so many Gouf flight types in Gundam Thunderbolt Bandit Flower? First correction, these Goufs aren't technically flight types, they are simply the Thunderbolt version of the standard Gouf with an additional special rotor backpack. This special rotor backpack couples a set of 2 rotors for stationary flight and VTOL abilities and also mounts a troop container to drop squadrons of infantry, although this comes at the cost of the spike squadrons, which spikes had to be removed. But yay, I digress. Now, asking why the Southeast Alliance has so many of these Goufs is not exactly right either. From what the manga and Bandit Flower shows, the Southeast Alliance only has a dozen of them, which is reasonable considering the Thunderbolt Gouf is equivalent to the mainland UC Gouf in terms of production. The Southeast Alliance is known to have built their arsenal by scavenging Zeon and Federation leftover war material alike, so that's where these Goufs come from. Now, about the customization with the rotors, it seems this modification is fairly common in the Thunderbolt continuity, as on the other side of the planet, in Africa, another similar custom Gouf called the Sin Custom also exists and is piloted by Sin Mitadera, a survivor of the Living Dead division that made it to Earth to work as a bodyguard. With this last question answered, this video sadly comes to an end. Thanks you all for staying this far, and a happy anniversary to us and our 5000 good friends here. If you are part of the new followers over these 5000, this means we have exceeded our goals and that you are of course now part of the Gundam Facts family. A good day to you, and see you all in a future video.
But who will survive?